I was my own bottleneck for a long time, and I decided at a certain point, it's like, I'm going to accept what my own limitations are here, and I'm going to put barriers in place or support in place that can help me through where I struggle. I have a core little group of like writer friends where it's like, we'll all talk about stuff. Like if somebody's got something, everyone reads it. I'll just call somebody. It's like, I'm stuck on this thing, and you just talk through it. And Snyder does the same thing. Like Snyder and I would do this together for years. And it's just like, just that process of being able to talk through it. Sometimes you don't even need someone to help you find an answer. You just need to verbalize it and get it out, you know?
Yeah, but it's a good suggestion about, talking to friends. The problem there is that your friends are smart. I only have dumb friends. And this guy down here proves that.
This is the INKPULP Podcast.
Hello. We always do this dumb, like, we don't know what we're doing yet.
Yeah, we don't know. We know how to end the episode with my obnoxious screaming, but we never know how to start.
Yeah, if you guys have suggestions.
I should start like, hello!
Kyle, are you familiar with Matteo's awful goodbyes?
I've heard a few of them, yeah. But they're, I don't know, they're charming at this point, Matteo.
I love them.
Oh, thank you, man. Finally, somebody understands me.
Somebody gets us. Welcome, everyone, to the INKPULP Podcast with the Fratelli Bros and our special guest today, Kyle Higgins. What's up, Kyle?
How's it going, guys?
Good. How you doing?
Yeah, not too much.
Matteo, how you doing?
So people don't know, but and probably Kyle doesn't know, but we recorded Kyle earlier because he had to stop for a second and bring coffee to his girlfriend, who's right next door, and we heard them having quick sex before.
Yeah.
So we have that part. We'll put it on the Patreon.
Yeah, that's just for the Patreon.
Whoever's interested.
I mean, at the same time, though, I mean, people get what they pay for. I'm going to be 40 this year, so it was really quick sex is what.
It was a $5 squeaky. So.
I mean, it's not with inflation, my friend, but sure.
And we want to thank you, Kyle, for being here bright and early on the West Coast time.
Yeah, man, we didn't realize that you were on West Coast time, and when you started talking, you were like, "So yeah, it's fucking sad."
There's a reason I've got. It was an extra shot of espresso in this morning. It was a late night on.
What did you make there?
Lives of cocaine.
What are you drinking there, Kyle?
That was before. This is it's just an iced like almond milk latte. That yeah,
with an extra shot.
Of cocaine, yes.
Yeah, good. Perfect for the show.
Exactly, yeah.
It will start kicking in like 10 minutes, so we'll start seeing like Kyle like start shaking.
There's an artist.
His upper lip
vibrating.
There's an artist. I'll just be rubbing my jaw. There's an artist. I'm not going to name any names here. There's an artist that I know who like just casually dropped one time like that they were getting through a deadline. They had gotten through a deadline on something we did with cocaine, and I was like, "What are you talking about? It's not. This is not the 80s or the 90s. I don't know how that would work." Yeah.
Yeah, I remember speaking to a couple of artists. Like this was years ago, and they were talking about doing drugs while working. And one of them was mainly like, I like to smoke. That expands my mind, so I'm more, imaginative. And the other one was like, I did cocaine a few times here and there just to experiment. I was like, how do you even ink?
Yeah,
by doing cocaine, like it's not possible. Maybe drawing with a pencil, but how do you even hold a brush?
They've got that Sienkiewicz jock kind of broken up line. There you go. That's how.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good question. Like when you're under deadline pressure, I've never found that I can use anything because caffeine will make me jittery. I can't ink with the jitters. Weed will just make me more tired. So that's not going to help. Just got to muscle through. Matteo, have you used anything?
No, at this point, I've just accepted that I have X amount of time during the day.
Yeah, that's what I did.
All I'm gonna do. So when the day is over, it's over.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to ask you, Kyle. So does it happen to you often to work at nighttime? Because you, as you were talking about, being awake at 7, you said that you were working last night.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's I try not to. It's not that common, to be honest, but the last probably 6 months or so, I've had more like really, really late nights, like 4 a.m. kind of nights than I've had in my entire career, like combined. Like, so it's been, the last 6 months have been pretty intense, but no, I don't. When I was in my 20s, like when I was really kind of in my mid to late 20s, when I was working at DC and doing all the New 52 stuff, that I felt like I was pulling an all-nighter like multiple times a week. And part of it was being just young and a new writer and trying to navigate doing this consistently at a certain level of quality. And the other part of it was, it was a crazy time at DC. So there was just a lot of pressure on everything and a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And there were a lot of rewrites. There were a lot of notes. There were a lot of it was just very, very stressful. And because I'm in LA, the thing I would always lament was I would lose 3 hours. So if I had to get something in by the start of the day, I have to get it in at 6 a.m. LA time because everyone's in New York at that time at DC. So it was really at 9 a.m. But then, at a certain point, I mean, it's very much diminishing returns. And so over the years, I don't mess around with sleep like at all. So even if I'm up really, really late, like I'm pretty good about, getting enough sleep after that, or trying to anyway. And yeah, it's pretty rare that I work like late into the night or anything like that. Like I'll usually I'll leave it and I'll come back. I'd rather get up at this point early. Yeah.
I'm the same.
Get to my desk. Way. Yeah.
You said,
but sometimes, if you have sometimes you have to, like sometimes I think that's the thing you guys probably, I'm sure you guys know this obviously, but like there's a difference between like, I don't want to say like a real deadline and like a fake deadline, because that's not
right. The hard deadline and the soft deadline. Let's do that.
Yeah. I mean, like there are actual deadlines where it's like, this has to go today to the printer, approved at the printer. Otherwise we are screwed. It slips a week or it slips longer. And it's just like, it's just going to suck. You have to, figure out a way to pull it off. So I'm good about knowing and recognizing like what those are, and and not, like we had one late last year for the trade paperback for our No One book, and this thing was just a behemoth, and we did something like 145 pages of art revisions for a lot of reasons. It's tied to a movie that I'm directing, and the movie's in universe with the book. And so I brought the costume designer on to help redesign a bunch of the fashion so that it matches what we're going to do in the film. The book will match it much better. But then there's also all this crazy additional material, like, podcast episodes that we did as a scripted audio series. And we did all these like viral, like short films and newspaper articles and all this stuff. And so there's like 35 QR codes in the book. Jeez. And the whole book, it's a 10-issue collection. So it's like a 360 page book. And it was like, this has to go on this day. And I was up, it was a 4:30 a.m. night doing like revisions. And it's just like, there's just no way around it. Like you just this is what it is. So, But yeah, long story short, I try not to do that very often.
Yeah.
You said,
well,
go ahead.
to me, though, the way I take it is just I consider every single deadline like as a hard deadline, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I make sure that I respect them all.
Well,
That's
sorry.
But yeah, no, I understand that you have a different standpoint because being the writer and the creator of everything, you have the full scope. As you were saying, like you have the movie and the podcast
Right.
episodes and everything. So you really know. I don't even ask like whatever the deadline that every time I'm given a deadline. So
Yeah.
I don't question that. And to me is always the final one. So we're in two different positions, of course.
There's a part of me that, I don't know. There's a little bit of, I mean, we're all like this to some extent. Like, I think we're probably very much deadline driven, and to my detriment, I think at times. There's a lot of throughout my career. I've made more stress for myself than I've needed, by way of like the anxiety around something. Being what ends up facilitating or forcing me to actually really, really hyper focus in to get things done. And there's a writer, there's a screenwriter that I followed for a long time, John August, who has a really, really great podcast. I haven't actually listened to it in a few years, but Script Notes with Craig Mazin. And I listened to this for like 10 years, I want to say.
I listened to that show.
Yeah, and John started saying, or he would say, I really liked it. He was like, at a certain point, I stopped saying I have bad habits, and I started saying I have habits. And there's this acknowledgement of like, there are things about the way you work or the way you create or the way you are that it's like, some of that is changeable and malleable and you can get better at. And there are other things that you just have to like come to terms with and figure out ways to work with and around. Otherwise you're just going to drive yourself crazy. And I would definitely have like, this is a whole other podcast, but yeah, like there's definitely, there's there for a long time an undiagnosed ADHD component for sure. And I didn't even probably realize it. And so a lot of times the way that I would get through things is like, I used to joke that it's like, it basically was like a combination of like ADHD and OCD, where it's like, I have to be under this like insane crunch in order to like hyper focus and get things done. But it's exhausting to get yourself into that place. And so it would create more kind of, unneeded stress and anxiety and everything.
Do you feel like you need that? Like, do you function creatively at your best under that kind of pressure?
I don't know if it's at my best, but that I do function quite a bit under that, in that kind of state. And I think it is a component of it, like where, I remember my dad worked in, he was in manufacturing for 45 years. He worked in the paint and coatings industry, but he's also a photographer. So he's got these two sides of his, personality and brain, where it's like very, very detailed and process driven, and, it's engineering basically. And then the other side is artistic. And I watched him. I worked at the paint company during summers in between, years of college. And he said to me early on about how part of what's a big challenge that a lot of people aren't good at doing within that, process driven, like, industry, I guess, is making decisions. Like, people don't like committing to decisions because they just can't make a decision. And in that case, you're talking about sometimes, thousands and thousands of gallons of product that you are looking to add a lot of, raw materials to in order to, change or lower viscosity or different aspects. And there's a lot of money riding on that. There's a lot of time, a lot of labor. And so people get gun shy on it. And that's something my dad was always really good at, is like understanding when a decision needs to be made and making a decision while leaving himself different avenues of outs, right? And I didn't understand that for a long time. And I can say now, looking at it, that it's absolutely a thing. And it's something that I come from a live action background, like a directing filmmaking background. Same thing when you're on set. It's like you're there with 40 people around you, and every second that you're there is money being spent. Not even to mention that, like, I grew up shooting on film, so that's even more. When the camera's rolling, it's even more money literally on screen, right? Or going through the camera. I guess it's not literally, but you know what I mean. And that's a thing, is like you also then have actors who are waiting for direction, but actually like direction that is playable, things that aren't going to confuse them and make it more muddled. And if you take things down the wrong path, sometimes you can't get back, you know, or you'll have talent or actors that lose confidence in you, and they'll start actually directing themselves, either consciously or subconsciously. So you feel that pressure kind of at all times. And I struggled with that at different points, but then I got comfortable in it, and I got, I think, really good at it. And I think there's a little bit of a byproduct of that now, where it's like, I do enjoy that kind of, I shouldn't even enjoy. It's like the pain, you know, is sometimes better than the pain you don't know. And it's like, I just understand and it feels comfortable or familiar. So I think I default to it sometimes when maybe I don't need to. But the other thing is, and the reason I paused so long at the top of this, when you asked me that, Shawn, was that it's been I think about that a lot, and it's unfortunately been a long time now where I'm too busy. I just have far too many things on my plate. So I don't even have the possibility of not being in that state, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
To get out. I'm trying to get out of that.
I'm in the same place as you. I'm busier than I've ever been, but it's because I've been building all of these avenues for my creativity and business to allow me to not have to be this way, because I've been living this way too long, and I just can't. I hate it. It wears me out financially. It's not good, and I'm over it.
Man, concerned about the state of the art form, the state of the craft.
Jim, what's up, brother? Look, don't worry. I've hired Dr. Pulpenstein, and he's going to fix everything.
Dr. Pulpenstein?
Ah! Hello there, Jim. I am hard at work at the antidote of what ails our craft. I've given Shawn the first dose.
First dose? Can you explain?
That's right, Jim. I got the first dose. I'm giving away my brand new sketchbook for free.
Free? Are you crazy?
Si, senor. It is correct. The first dose is Shawn's free sketchbook.
We're doing like a Spanish thing now, I guess.
That's right. My new sketchbook, INKPULP Magenta, is totally free. All you gotta do is head over to my Kickstarter pre-launch page, which is for my new art book, INKPULP Cyan. Enter your email, pledge at any tier level on the INKPULP Cyan campaign, and you will get INKPULP Magenta, the sketchbook, free PDF emailed to you.
Man, that is great, Shawn.
See ya, Jim. Shawn's newest sketchbook is totally free.
Okay, this is Italian now? Is that what's happening?
That's why I was asking. Matteo, what about you? Do you like pressure on you?
I found really interesting things in what Kyle said. Like the problem the thing about our job is that it's a creative job, but it has this component which makes it quantifiable. Does it exist, this word in English?
Yeah. That's it.
So basically, it's counted in pages, in how much stuff are you able to create.
Yep.
But on the other end, it's still a creative job. You gotta invent, you gotta create stuff. So and sometimes, you know, if I know that in a month I have to do 20 pages, that means that I have to do 5 pages every week.
Right.
There's no way around it. The average, then I can make 4 a week, and then the next week I can do 6. But overall, the end of the month, the final count has to be 20. Otherwise, I didn't do my job properly. But at the same time, there's some days, or sometimes the script is really easy, and sometimes the script is really complicated. And sometimes my brain works in a way, and some other times my brain's not working. So I have to spend like 3 hours of the day just on one panel, because somehow that day I can draw a guy seen from a low angle that normally I would draw in a second, but today it takes me 3 hours.
Right.
And what helps me, like, and I talked about this, and generally speaking, what did I want to say? So generally speaking, I realized that I need, like Kyle needs this thing, I need some of that anxiety, because if I don't have it, and I experienced that over the past like 2 years working on my project. Originally, I decided I don't want to have no deadline. I just want to work on the book, and the book is ready when it's ready. But I saw that with no deadline, I wasn't actually working. I didn't have that necessary push. As soon as I decided, you know what, I need to make some money, so I said yes to a couple of big things that I'm working on now. Immediately, I saw that, okay, I gotta at least finish this and this and this by that date, and immediately my book started like shaping up like super fast, and it's with quality. It's not that I was just rushing up.
Right.
The quality was there. It's because knowing that I had deadlines activated something in me. Sure. And the thing that I learned, which is an important thing, I think, is learn from experience. So and this it's a really simple thing, but I needed the help of my therapist for that. At a certain point, I kept my sessions with her were always like, okay, so I took this new job and I'm stressed out. I'm having anxiety because the deadline's too tight and blah, blah, blah. And then a second time, like, now I'm anxious because of the second project. And now I'm anxious because of the new project. And after a few years, she was like, okay, so you've been talking about these projects every time and you're anxious. But we've been talking about this for over the past 8 years. But every time you delivered, right? Yeah. So their experience is that every time you make it. So now every time I'm starting to feel the anxiety, I start talking to myself and say, you've done it over the past 18 years of your career.
Yes.
So much probably, unless they give you 2 days to do 20 pages, which is impossible, if the timeline is reasonable, you're going to make it like you always have, you know? And that's what helps me going through these phases.
Real quick, I relate to all of that so much. And I think that now that I do, you know, because I don't just write anymore, and I kind of have my own little company, and we do a lot of different things, both on the book front, but then in other mediums now as well. And I work with a lot of clients who have never made comics before. And so I feel like I'm constantly teaching how this process works and this industry works. And I always explain that, like, look, this is with no slight against my fellow writers, myself included, as well as certainly artists, but we are all like, we're like voluminous gas. We will take up as much space as you give us. If you give us this many weeks, it's going to take that many weeks to get, with rare exception. You know, I feel like somebody like Capullo is just like, it's like he almost takes it as like a personal challenge. Whatever the deadline is, he's going to come in early, you know what I mean? Or something like, but most of us will take as much kind of space as we're allowed and afforded. And the thing about Matteo, you're talking about, like, some days it'll take you this long on a page or on a panel, or this shot should take you this long. When I was doing the Batman, when I was doing all the Batman line stuff, I first kind of I don't know. I used this analogy one time with Mike Martz, and he chuckled and he got it. But it's like, I don't know what it's like in Italy, but in the US, like driving, if you guys have ever had a job where you have to be there at a certain time every single day, right? Let's say it's it's actually my dad's, like where I used to work over the summers, it was like, it's a 45-minute drive. Okay. That's just what it is every morning. And, one morning you wake up and you oversleep, or you're running late and you leave the house and you leave 10 minutes late and you are fucked, right? Like, you are so screwed. But by some miracle, you catch every green light, and it's a half holiday or something that day, or it was a long weekend or whatever, people out of town, and you get there now in 35 minutes. And it's like, you get there and you breathe a sigh of relief, like, holy cow, like I made it, I'm okay. Now all of a sudden the next morning you wake up and you're like, it's only a 35-minute drive. It's like, no. And that's the thing, is you're like, oh yeah, I could do a script in this amount of time. I could do, because once, with gun to my head, back against the wall, and everything was working, I was able to do something at my best like this. Well, then that shouldn't become your new standard, because you're just going to disappoint yourself and your editors every single time. Right. So I feel like that is a thing that I fought against for a long time. And then the last thing is what you just said about, like, I describe it as like respecting the process. Like, you have to just respect the process, and the process is that it sucks until it doesn't, usually. And similarly, the amount of anxiety, like literally what I was up last night working on, I was up till 4:30, and it's like, there's stuff, it's a lettering script on an issue of Radiant Black that has to, be printed in the next couple days. And there are parts of it that just aren't quite working. And at the same time, I've done this so long now, and we always pull it together. And I had to kind of talk myself down in that same way, where it's like, okay, yeah, you're not finding it at this moment because it's 4 a.m., but you're going to refine it. And I have really good people around me that can help me find things. And that's the other thing, is like, I don't know if you guys work with assistants ever or things like that, but I was my own bottleneck for a long time. And I decided at a certain point, it's like, I'm going to accept what my own limitations are here. And I'm going to put barriers in place or support in place that can help me through where I struggle. And that even includes just like on our own books, like Michael Basudel, who's our editor and designer. He's he's in Australia. I mean, I couldn't do this without him, and having that resource. And I have other friends that, I have a core little group of like writer friends where it's like, we'll all talk about stuff. Like, if somebody's got something, everyone reads it. I'll just call somebody. It's like, I'm stuck on this thing, and you just talk through it. And Snyder does the same thing. Like, Snyder and I would do this together for years. And it's just like, just that process of being able to talk through it. Sometimes you don't even need someone to help you find an answer. You just need to verbalize it and get it out, And so just understanding where those pressure points are and finding ways to put support there for yourself to alleviate those points, I think is really important. I think it's also probably something you only really figure out, similar to, as you're saying with your therapist, it was how many years of, before you recognize that this is what you're doing. I think you just have to have the time. You have to put in the time before you understand where your real limitations are,
Yeah, and for our audience,
but it's a good suggestion about talking to friends. The problem there is that your friends are smart. I only have dumb friends, and this guy down here proves that. That's the main problem. So I can't talk to anyone. I can only talk about French fries and poop. That's the problem with this guy. I
was going to say, what Matteo went through that took years would take the average person just a few sessions, because Matteo's a little slow.
Well, it's that Italian European, like they're on holiday, they're like taking time off, just months. They don't open their shop until noon, right? That's what it's like, right?
Yeah, exactly. But putting the jokes aside, another interesting thing that you said is that having the new standard, so I did it in 35 minutes, so now I can do it all the time.
Right.
Luckily I've abandoned that, because, and this probably is my Italian origins that have the tendency of like, okay, now we can relax. Like all my career at the beginning was just waiting. I just have to work a lot so that I don't have to work so hard in the future. That was my goal ever. Yeah. So aside from now, because I took a lot of things at the same time, so I'm working a lot, way more than I used to. But my thing was when I felt I had the voice to ask and I was in a position to ask, I started asking for more time to do stuff, more money, and, you know, just so that I could make the same amount of money with the least amount of work, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well,
that's probably, I'm just lazy probably. But
Matteo, you're the opposite of lazy.
I mean, it's that like age old adage about, you know, under promising and over delivering. And the more that you can put yourself in that position to, the more you can put yourself in that position, I think the better for your own, not only the work, but for your own mental health. Unless you just need that insane crunch anxiety to get stuff done. And if that's the case, then I would say, go just talk to a doctor. Like just see what you can do.
Even
to
when
start
I ask for
alleviating.
more time, what I end up doing is basically procrastinating more or less. So just working really slow until I'll start to realize that I'm fucked. And then I'll start working at my usual timing and usual
volume is gas, man.
Yeah,
you'll take up as much space as you're given. Yeah.
Kyle, I want to ask you, you said you realized you were your own bottleneck, and this is something I've come to realize about myself sort of recently. Can you speak on that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how specific you want to get, but basically,
like what were you seeing that you were doing that was creating your own bottleneck?
You know what? I can give a really good example on this. Also, I'm going to stop my camera down slightly because the sun's starting to come up here, and now I'm starting to get a little overexposed. So here's a really good example. It's actually it's not specific to comics. It's actually for all the film stuff that I love. And that's really my first love is directing. Like I'm sitting here right now, like on my desk. I won't turn my camera because that'll break it, but I have I have a poster here. It's an original one sheet from the first Superman film directed by Richard Donner, written by Tom Mankiewicz. So I interned for Dick Donner. I love this movie. I grew up on this movie. Burton's Batman, like those are the films that helped me end up finding comics, but also a love of filmmaking. And I started making little movies since I was basically 7 years old. This poster was actually given to me by Tom, who was my mentor in college. And after he passed away in 2010, I reached back out to the Donners, and Dick signed this to me.
Wow.
Kyle, hope to sign your DGA card, which is your Directors Guild of America card. Best Richard Dick Donner. And I'm finally now this year going to direct my first feature, which is 15 years after I started. I mean, I came out here 20 years ago for film school. And then I'd say about 15 years ago is when I was first in a position to actually be able to direct a feature because of a film that I did in college that was a big superhero noir. That's how my comics career started, all of it, right? And I made this movie and it almost killed me. I mean, it was like 30 minutes long, shot entirely on Super 16 film, tons of visual effects, tons of, fight choreography, stunt doubles. It's a period film as well. It was a huge undertaking. And, the first person who wrote to me after they saw it was Joe Quesada. And so I was like 23 and I started pitching at Marvel, right? But the other thing that happened was I ended up getting a lot of heat and attention in town as a director, which is the dream. That's literally what I've wanted to do my whole life, right? That's what I've killed myself towards since I was, 16, 17 years old. And so I signed at a big management company and a talent agency. I signed at Management 360 and at UTA, United Talent Agency. And I did 6 months of meetings, basically, like generals. They call it the water bottle tour. I did like something like 70 or 75 meetings, and I was going up for some like really big projects. And this was like the point in time where you could still get a sizable feature film.
Sorry to interrupt. Why do they call it the water bottle tour?
Because every time you go into one of these meetings, they're called, most of them were what are called general meetings, where you're just going in because your reps have sent your material out, and this production company, this producer, this studio exec has responded, and so it's really about getting on their radar. And so you take a general meeting, and they call it the water bottle tour because they always offer you water when you get there, and so you end up like with all these water bottles that you're plastic. It's awful for the environment, right? Like, but
that's basically the main cause for all the environmental problems. All these meetings
exactly
in Hollywood.
That's exactly what it is.
People don't talk enough about that. I do that.
So this was 2008, and so you could still get like a big movie off of a short film. And there was a senior vice president at Universal who was telling my reps like, I think like a $40 million film for Kyle's first feature makes sense, Sure, yeah, of course, that makes total sense. I went up for what at the time, they never made the movie, but I went up for like the biggest one was like, I went up for a $90 million feature at Warner Brothers. Wow. And again, I'm 23, 24, maybe 24. No, 20. I was 23. And it's like, I'm not going to get that film, but it was like Joel Silver was the producer. So I'd gone through like all of this whole process and everything. And then where I'm going with this is that there were a lot of opportunities there, and everyone was just waiting for me to bring in a script that I wanted to make. And I couldn't do it. And I joke when I tell people this story now, it's like, do you know how many pages that is? That's so much, like it's 100 pages of story. Are you kidding me? Like, no, I don't know. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. But I was sitting there going like, well, I want to write and direct my own material. And so it's like, I need to write my own material. Right. And then I couldn't do it because I didn't know how. I'd never written a feature before. Right. And rather than, and look, I had friends who wrote things, and so you would consider that and everything. But like, I never put myself in a position to co-write something. I never tried to figure out like what's the most efficient way to get towards where I want to be. And what I really want to be doing is making a movie. Why is it that I'm letting my ego? The answer is because you're young. Letting my ego and insecurity there like dictate and drive these decisions that are in the opposite direction of what I want to be doing. And the reason I flagged 15 years is because this didn't go away. And I don't think I ended up writing my first solo feature. I didn't finish it until 2018. And I directed a big new short film in there in 2015, but for the first, I would say 6 or 7 years of my comics career, I resented it quite a bit inside because I felt like I was doing it at the expense of what I really wanted to be doing. And that's not to say that I disliked comics. I love comics, obviously, but I basically hated myself over the fact that I couldn't do the thing that I really wanted to do. And then I felt like, well, I deserve that because I'm a hack. I can't do this because, I'm not doing it because I can't. And so that I'm getting what I deserve. And rather than reaching out and trying to find a way to, work with someone who isn't, I have different strengths than we all have different strengths than other people have, you know, and there are aspects of my personality and kind of my creativity and drive where in some ways I have a little bit more of a producer brain, I think, than a natural writer brain, just because, you know, I've always been good at and really prided myself on like connecting people and like looking for ways to create opportunities, or like, ooh, this would be cool, you know, going this direction, or these people working together. It's part of why I love comics so much, because of the collaboration, but also like, you know, I love doing conventions because of the number of artists I meet. And then in my brain, just thinking about like, oh, they'd be really cool drawing this kind of thing or this. And then you just remember that, and you have that Rolodex, you know. And I know plenty of friends who aren't good at that side of it. But they'll crank out pages and they'll crush a deadline, you know? And so, at a certain point, because this was going on in comics as well, to some extent, at a certain point, I just kind of got out of my own way, where I felt like part of it's probably just growing up a bit and just getting a little older. But I just got tired of being my own kind of worst enemy in that way. And, you know, if you look at a lot of the books I do now, you'll see I co-write quite a bit, and it's just, I enjoy it. But it's also a little bit, in some cases, a necessity, because I don't want things to fall off the rails. There's too much at stake at this point. I can't let things fall off the rails in a way that I feel like in the past, you know, some projects were more stressful than they needed to be, or you know, deadlines were really bad, or things. It's just like, I don't need to do that or let that happen anymore. I'd rather have help than, you know, than create more of a problem than needs to be, I guess. And what that's allowed for is more collaboration. It's also allowed for more, honestly, we just being able to do more, which personality wise is probably something I need to work on as well. Because similar to you, Matteo, it's like I overload, and then it's like, you know, that kind of, you know, greatest strength is also kind of like your biggest weakness, which is like, I'm really good at juggling a lot of plates, but at a certain point, you know, one or two of those are going to fall. That's just inevitably going to happen. And it's like, well, I don't want to do that anymore. And so having people where it's like, you know, yeah, just people to lean on. And that can be anything from just like being able to talk through something and help, you know, someone helping me break something just on the phone, even just friends. It can be, you know, one of my best friends, Joe Clark, who writes a bunch of stuff with me now. It's like, Joe is a machine, you know, and Joe is really, really good and really smart. And it's like, great. Like Joe and I co-writing something where he'll break something, or he'll put a first draft down and I'll come in and I'll rewrite it. It's like, I'm fine working that way. Like there's a bit of like, I will work in whatever way I am most beneficial in this, but sometimes being the sole, you know, driver of something, won't be as efficient as it would be if I was doing it in collaboration with someone.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I think it's always, I was thinking about what you said, that you're probably more, your attitude, your personality leads more to a producer role. That must serve you well, I imagine, with the Massiveverse, the thing that you've created, you know? So I'm thinking, when you were talking about the collaborators, my mind was already going there, you know, handling a lot of different things, because, I mean, there's a lot of titles in this multiverse that you've created. And I was curious to know, was that always the plan? Because in this Massiveverse, there's a lot of books. Some of them you created many years ago. Was that always the plan since the beginning, or
not?
I was curious.
Not not that succinctly, no. Like it, the first book, I think the one you're probably referring to is, I think that's honestly when you and I first met, is when I was doing Cowl and you were doing Black Science. Yeah. So Cowl is based on my college film, the one that I was just talking about. And so Cowl is something that was really, really, important to me for a long time. And I wanted to find a way to make something in this world in comics. And it ended up becoming my first Image series with Rod Reese. And then Alex Siegel, who's my best friend from high school, we'd created it together when we were in college. And then we wrote everything together, wrote the book together. And still, we're finishing the last issue of the 1964 miniseries right now. And, but it wasn't intended to connect in the way that we have connected it with Radiant Black and the Massiveverse. But when we started Radiant Black, it was actually Eric Stevenson who first suggested and asked if I would ever have interest in building like an original superhero. And I had done, 3 years on Power Rangers, and I wrote the first 3 years of that line for Boom. And it did really well. And it was something that, I was coming off of a challenging time at DC where things didn't really work out. And then Power Rangers was kind of like, in some ways, it felt like kind of a second act for me, which is funny to think about now, because I feel like right now I'm in my second act, not, 6 or 7, not 7 years ago. But that became kind of, a platform kind of title for me in a new way. And so Eric asked if I'd, want to build something. And he's like, think of it as like optimistic sci-fi if you want, like, but not like, Marvel and DC analogs, like something contemporary and something like, new. And I didn't think there'd be a market for that, or I never had thought there'd be a market for that. But I was like, I would kill to do something like that. And he's like, I think it can work. I think there is a market for it. And he goes, and if there are any other creators who you think would be a good fit for this, like, feel free to mention it to them. And so my first call was to Ryan Parrott, who, was writing the Power Ranger books after me. And then Ryan also, we went to college together. Like, I brought him on to Gates of Gotham for the last couple issues of that. And that was his first comics work. And then that, sparked other things for him. And so, the idea of like, why don't we both do something in this, kind of space felt like a really, really fun idea. And he ended up pitching me what became Rogue Sun, like pretty much fully formed, like 3 or 4 days later. And while that was going on, I also was working with Matt Groom, who I had met doing a Power Ranger podcast, honestly, him and Michael now edits and designs everything. And I actually put together Matt's first book at Image called Self-Made. And I was the editor on that. And that was the first time that I tried what we're talking about, where it was like, I've never done this before. There's no such thing as a producer in comics. That's not a thing. And like anyone who says they are is really probably a douchebag and probably just trying to like steal your IP. But the way I kind of looked at it and positioned
Which
it
is
was
not
like,
what Kyle is trying to do. All right.
No, everyone owns their own book in our line.
No, of course. I was trying to, sometimes I try to slip in jokes just to.
I still haven't finished my
better
first...
at my English and timing.
Yeah, Matteo's got to read the room better. That's what that was.
But Matt had pitched me this idea about doing like a kind of YA leaning, tokusatsu hero called, at the time it was called Dragon Girl Red, but it became Inferno Girl Red. And so we had been working on that behind the scenes before Radiant Black. And it just took longer because he wanted to do it as an OGN, and he, finding the right artist and the right partner for it was hard, took a long time. And so these things were happening kind of on parallel tracks. And then we knew what the numbers were on Radiant Black #1, and they were really good. And also, I don't think the first issue had even come out yet, but that I did have the idea basically one night where it was like, oh, we could do this. Like, we could figure out a way to do kind of our own corner of like the Image superhero universe and like create out our own little kind of like, I don't know, just like little line of stuff where they'd be interconnected but not reliant on each other. And like we're really, really big on that, is like everything needs to be really accessible and not, you know, there's a reason every book is set in a different city. It just makes it easier for each book and title to build out its own, you know, world without it having that problem of like, you know, I think in the original, isn't it in the original Spawn, like, isn't it Chapel that kills Al Simmons, and Chapel is a Rob Liefeld character. And so it's like, we want one of the characters to meet, to be able to, you know, bounce off each other, but not for like foundational stuff to involve any of the other characters, just to keep everything, you know, accessible and clean. And, and so then it kind of grew from there basically. And then the idea of linking Cowl into it, I figured out how to do that, and that got me really excited. And then it just kind of organically grew into what it is now. But no, I wouldn't say like from the jump, it was like, you know, the aspirations were like, I want to create like an original superhero universe. And like, that's how I'm going to spend my next, you know, 5, 8, 10 years.
Your secret plan for like 10 years. You see what's going to happen 10 years from now.
But one of the challenges with it, to your point though, is like, like I creative direct on all of the books, and between Michael and myself, we run all of the titles, and I'm very, very involved in all of it behind the scenes. But then there's also the part of it where it's like a number of the things are still things that I also write. And so those are two different jobs, and that's a challenge, just from a bandwidth and a focus standpoint, is like Kyle, the writer, and Kyle, the kind of, you know, I guess editor, creative director, however you want to, you know, think of it. So that's something I'm still trying to get better at. And it's that's a hard one.
So with
it's a lot of moving parts. So it gets
I can imagine
pretty tiring.
With everything you're doing, is there a place you're trying to get with this, or you just, this feels right now and you're just seeing where it goes?
I mean,
becoming a multimillionaire, I guess. that's the plan, right? That's everybody's plan, right?
Yeah. No. So I just want it to be sustainable, honestly. Like, it's an uphill battle, an uphill climb. And like, issue 31 of Radiant Black is about to come out. It's out next week. And because we did this, you know, split timeline thing last year, where we were basically exploring, our event was like, we're exploring 2 parallel timelines under 2 different covers with 2 different art teams doing 2 completely different books of these divergent timelines. So the numbering became wonky because retailers, it was challenging with like doing it under 2 different covers. So then we changed it to like a 0.5 issue. And in hindsight, we should have just done sequential numbering rather than 26, 26.5, 27, 27.5. We should have just done 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. But I was like very
that's what it is. Because I was looking the other day and I saw the issues on the Image website. And then at a certain point I saw, 27.5. I'm like, the fuck is that? They had extra pages afterwards and just sold Alpha Comics after.
No. So the gag, well, that's what some people thought we did, and it was challenging from a messaging standpoint. But the gag was, I've got them right here actually. So in issue 25, what we did was, these are the 2 different covers of 25, and they create an interconnected image, right?
Yeah.
And this kicked off the event, and the idea was that we had done 2 years of the 2 best friends basically sharing the powers go back and forth between the 2 main characters.
Yeah.
And then they were sharing the powers for a while, and we, right on the eve of this event launching, in the story, they find out that they can't do that anymore, and they have to choose. Only one of them can be Radiant Black, like permanently for the rest of their lives. Like, they have to decide. And so we in the book, as the robot's telling them this, there's a giant QR code. And when readers scanned it, we did a vote. We basically did a Jason Todd vote for who would be Radiant Black. And then the kickoff of the event, issue 25 was also to give you the answer. And so we gave you the answer, but we did something that no one's really done before, which is that we made 2 different endings, and we published the 2 different endings with 2 different art teams, where they choose one of the characters in one ending, and the characters choose one of the other character in the other ending, right?
That Matteo, weren't you wanting to do that with Black Science?
Well, originally it was just something similar. With Black Science, we were planning on doing the last issue should have been 3 different issues with 3 different ending, but the cover and everything would be the same. So people would get the ending that they deserve, basically. You would pick your Black Science in the shop, and you just get whatever you get. Yes. But then we saw that it wasn't like, there was an ending that was really strong, an ending which was like a meh, and another ending which was really weak. So the only way they would work was together. So we end up alternating in the same book, basically.
Well, first of all, that would have been awesome. Second of all, you also would have hated yourself doing it, because we got like, so I reached out to about 75 retailers personally to tell them this is what we're doing, but it was a secret. And so we didn't tell readers that there were 2 different endings, and it created, and the point was I wanted to create I don't want to say confusion, but like it's a wait, what just happened?
But I know that kind of stuff. It's the same. Sorry to interrupt, but the funny thing that Rick and I wanted to happen was like that you read Black Science and then it's over. And then a few years after, you read a review or somebody's talking about it. And it's like, well, the ending, I didn't like it because the guy died. And you're like, what the fuck are you saying? The guy didn't die. Yeah. Yes, of course. And then they check. So some people, the funny thing was that some people would realize after 2 years that there was different endings, and some people will live their entire life by not knowing about this alternate ending, and that's it. That's the beauty of destiny, I guess.
Well, see, where you were smart there was like it was going to be the ending. What we ended up doing was this was foundational to our event, and that one of the characters in the book with the yellow radiant, he can perceive all the different branching points in his life and place his consciousness anywhere and perceive out like forward and backward what could have been and what might be. And so he's actually in a kind of a God mode. He's actually broken the timeline. And so I wanted to use the variant cover as a storytelling mechanism to explore an alternate timeline, but retailers couldn't get their head around it. And there's a lot going on in the industry. Things are super fractured these days. There's no central hub for anything anymore, even from a messaging standpoint. Social media obviously is not what it was. Right. And so it was a challenge. And so we ended up changing it from A cover, B cover to like the 0.5 thing. And like I said, in hindsight, I should have just done subsequent numbering and put out the 2, because we put out 2 books for every release. And those 2 books are 2 different comics. And it starts by the artist riffing on the same layouts in issue 26 and 26.5. And then by the final issues, they are so far off. But anyway, it was a massive undertaking and almost killed us. But I'm also like crazy proud of the story. Like we stuck the landing. Like it reads in trade beautifully. But this was a long walk to the fact that like we've really done like 36 issues, but we're up to like numbering of 31. And where I'm going with that though is like if you look at just, if you go to a comic book store, like you're not going to see a ton of books at above an issue number 30, and you're not going to see a lot of indie books above an issue number 30. So the idea of like where I want to be is just like to get to the point where all this stuff is sustainable is the goal. And the unfortunate reality within the market and our industry right now is that like you kind of, at a certain point, you need something to help break through and raise general awareness in a really significant way for it to really be able to continue. And so like, obviously the dream, or not the dream, but like the lottery ticket version is like you do a show or you do an animated series or you do something that, or film, something that really kind of breaks through, but you can't bank on that either, you know, and like,
and now that's not an insurance either, because not only is it's got to be out, but then it's got to be successful in a sea of other products like that. So it's
so a lot of what we do
more than a lottery.
Exactly. And so like a lot of what we do now is like there's a lot of multimedia that we do as a part of the books. And like we'll do things like we're really, really big on immersion. And so like we'll do issues of Radiant Black inside the black holes. We do them all fluorescent ink. So the whole book is a blacklight comic, right? We'll do like secret cartoons that are in universe with the book, and you scan a QR code in the book and you realize like we actually made the film that the YouTubers in the book were making, right? With No One, that's the one with the film, and Matteo did my favorite cover for it, the yellow one. And that, you know, again, the comic, the audio series, the websites, the articles, the film are all part of one thing, right? And we do that kind of stuff for two reasons. One, it's the kind of thing that like hopefully it's like, okay, like doing a film ourselves where Brian and I are writing and I'm directing it, and it's designed in an unconventional way at a low budget where it's like it's a fake documentary. And Steven Schneider, who did like Paranormal Activity and the Insidious movies, so he's very, very much in that. He's kind of like the king in that found footage kind of world. It's like this is a different way of making essentially a found footage movie, but it's also something that no one's done before, because it's, like I said, it's not an adaptation of the comic. It's a it is because it's adapting the events. It's covering the events of the comic and the audio series, but it's also continuing the story. So it ends up driving people back to the book. And then the other, but I shouldn't have led with the practical reasons, because the real reason where this really started is because this is all stuff that I love and that we all enjoy doing. And like all of these facets of my kind of like creative life for many years of doing comics, I wasn't able to do a lot of these things. And I feel like that's where some of my frustration internally was coming from as well, where it's like, I direct, I voice direct, I was a musician. Like I do a lot of other things beyond writing, you know, comics. And this ends up kind of, I worked in post-production for a long time. Like a lot of our stuff, like I cut myself, like I animate, like, you know, I was a sound editor for 10 years. And so it's like, this line has ended up creating an opportunity to do more of these things that I really, really enjoy creatively. And it just so happens that they are additive to the types of stories we're telling, where, you know, it plays with that mixed media it's more of a feature rather than the bug. And all of the instances where we do that stuff, first and foremost, it has to be, it has to like work with like thematically with what the material's about or it's exploring. So it's like designing the No One film as a fake documentary works because it's this true crime, you know, kind of subject material. And, you know, doing the audio series, the podcast is like, well, it makes sense because it's like, you know, the book's kind of in a Batman Daredevil kind of model. And so the reporters covering the events, it's like in 2024, they'd probably have a podcast as well. You know what I mean? And so it doesn't feel incongruous with the subject matter. It has to work with it. But it also affords me like all these other creative opportunities. So that's really, I think, sustainable is where where we're trying to get to anyway.
That's a good place.
Yeah. So speaking of which, just a quick question. So
go ahead.
Yeah. So right now you're just doing your own stuff right now, right? You're not doing like freelance work anymore. Speaking of the big two, mainly is what I'm talking about. But
I am doing like I'm doing a handful of things freelance. Like I'm doing the Spider-Verse, Venomverse like event, miniseries event with Matt Groom. We're writing it together. And then there's something else we're doing that's not announced yet. I'm really, really excited about, actually.
Awesome, man.
And then like I'm writing a feature for hire on something else, and then I'm also there's some other stuff I'm managing that behind the scenes that I don't think people know about, that I'm not writing, but I'm doing. Yeah.
Do you think that when the sustainability of your old plans will come to to happen, do you think you'll just do that, or you still enjoy working on, freelance? I'm just
It's curious. A really good question.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I think I would just do that. Yeah, I don't think I would work on freelance stuff. It would have to be, and even now, like Marvel and DC stuff, like it really has to be something special that really excites me for me to do it or want to do it. With I am like that. Scott talked to me many times about the Absolute line, and it wasn't something that it wasn't something I wanted to do.
Yeah, it wasn't vibing with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I passed on it, and I'm super happy for all my friends doing those books, and they're doing really well for stores and retailers, which is amazing. But it's also something where I kind of said to Scott during, I was like, I just don't think I'm that guy anymore. Like the version that we worked together, and when I was doing Nightwing and all the DC stuff, and it's weird to think about being at a point both creatively but also career wise where it's like being able, much less willing to say no for something like that. But I'm glad that I'm able to do that,
Yeah, absolutely, man. All right, I think, we got to an hour, man.
Yeah,
already.
we did good. So let me.
Sorry,
let me
I ramble.
No.
No.
That's what we want.
You'd be awesome, man.
Yeah, you'd be great. We're not done with you yet, though. The podcast is going to end in a second with Matteo's sign out. But for all you Patreon members, and if you're not a Patreon member, link below, you can watch the next 30 minutes where we have some questions that you all submitted for Kyle, and we'll chat it up. So Matteo, Kyle, just hang out.
Before I do my magic, work my magic. Kyle, do you want to plug anything in particular? You're saying that the new book of Radiant Black was out a couple of weeks ago. Last week, sorry, I missed that.
Next week. February 26th. Yeah. I guess the quick things I would mention. We've got this issue of Radiant Black, issue 31, that comes out on February 26th, and we have been doing like a really, really big, like kind of push for it. If you're listening to this podcast, you've probably listened to some other comics podcasts, and if you're listening to other comics podcasts, I'm sure you probably saw my name pop up in the last couple weeks. I apologize. I kind of went everywhere because, to the point of what we were talking about before about, doing books above a certain number, raising awareness and creating jumping on points and points for not only new readers and maybe old readers, but retailers to rally around and get excited about, but also have an entryway into stuff is really, really important, especially now. And so issue 31 of Radiant Black is designed as a really, really clean jumping on point. It starts like our next era here. We're describing as our rebuild era, not only of Radiant Black, but like of the Massiveverse. And so
the whole universe.
We had a lot of delays last year, but we're back on track now. So we're just down to Radiant Black and Rogue Sun as far as monthly ongoing books. And 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from when we're recording this, Rogue Sun 25 comes out from Ryan Parrott and Abel, and that also is like very, very clean new jumping on point for Rogue Sun. So we're doing those things. If anyone's like interested in Radiant Black or wanted to check it out but hasn't yet, we did this cool thing, this like story so far. It's a 16-page free comic that basically walks you through the first 3 years of the book. And tease you up for 31.
It's basically your previously on Radiant Black.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what's funny? You do the voice, but you know what we did. So we put this out for free. It went to stores as a surprise, but then we put it out digitally for free. If you go to radiant.black/ketchup, all one word, CATCHUP, not the condiment. So you can read it there, right? But we just released like 2 weeks ago. I got so Will Friedle, who voices Batman Beyond and a lot of Marvel and DC characters. He was on a show called Boy Meets World that was very popular in the 90s. His best friend is Ryder Strong, who was also on Boy Meets World. They are voicing Marshall and Nathan in our big Radiant Black audiobook that we're doing. Awesome. We're doing it with a full voice cast. So they actually recorded with me this recap, and then I animated a 2-minute long video, and we had we did a big orchestral score for the book in the first 6 issues, so we're using that score as well. So they actually, as Marshall and Nathan, narrate through the previously on Radiant Black as like the characters. So awesome. That's out there now as well. And then
please share the link so that we'd put it in the description.
Yeah, email that to me, Kyle. I'll put it all in the description.
And then the only other thing I'd plug, if it's cool, is just we have a newsletter that I do called Black Market News. If you go to blackmarket.la, that's our website for my little creative collective studio, Black Market Narrative. You can sign up for the newsletter there, or if you just go to blackmarket.la/newsletter or radiant.black/newsletter, it all goes to the same place. And that's where we drop like a lot of announcements, a lot of new stuff. We do like exclusive stuff. We do like really limited merch, not even merch drops, but like variant covers and like slipcase things and things like that. Mm-hmm. But we're also going to start doing stuff coming up that I haven't, saying it for the first time here publicly. We're going to do some stuff in the newsletter, and the newsletter's for free, by the way. But we're going to start doing stuff this year that involves original story stuff that we're going to put out through the newsletter. And again, it's newsletter's free. But that'll be a cool place to check out some stuff. And it will be different. Like we do it through Substack, but like what I'm talking about is different than what people were doing with Substack, with like kind of traditional comics pages through that platform. Like we're doing something quite a bit different there, but I think really utilizes the format in a pretty cool way. So sign up for that stuff there. That's kind of the best place to find me and find kind of our stuff at this point.
That's awesome, man.
Nice. Yeah. That sounds great.
It's time.
All right, Matteo.
Is it time? It's the time.
Here we go.
It's the time.
The INKPULP Podcast.